I am Dan Miles, and Ben Fleeby and I are the co-writers for Tale of the Taira, which is our graphic novel adaptation of a medieval Japanese epic from sort of the early Kamakura period, early 1200s, which just successfully reached our first funding goal. That was on Friday. So we're excited about that, but we've got some stretch goals to push for, and we're excited to give you a little more information about stuff behind the scenes as we work on that. And we're excited to be joined by some of the creators from Kugali, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ziki Nelson. I'm the founder of Kugali and also one of the creators. For those of you who haven't heard of Kugali, we're essentially an arts and animation collective that focus on African culture and storytelling. Our campaign is to bring forth a comic book that features the work of various African comic book writers and artists, self included.
Yeah, I was actually when I pledged for the anthology, I was a little curious. You said you have like a whole collection of artists. Are they all like African based? Because I know you're in the UK.
So everyone actually lives in. I'm originally from Nigeria, but now it's what we call the African diaspora. They're originally from Africa.
Yeah.
Find themselves in different parts of the world at the moment.
Cool. I imagine that gives a wider variety of perspectives that way.
Very important. Say the word African, what does it really mean? Because it's such a huge place. And so for us to really justice to that label, as diverse as possible by bringing as many different perspectives. So we have contributors from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and list by head, but it's something about like about 10 different about 10 different countries. We want to continue expanding that way. That's more or less it.
Cool.
I imagine to America, when people think of America, there may be certain images that they're pop in their head, but America is actually a huge place, and so there's a little bit of diversity across the country as well.
Yeah, particularly as a nation of immigrants.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's you know, we just got our goal, but you smashed yours. You kind of you did it in a bit more style than we did.
Well, yeah, thanks. It's just been a hell of an experience, particularly when you hit your initial goal in just over a week. I think we have a lot of people to thank for that. Clearly, I googled Kugali recently, and some of the blogs and the websites that decided to cover this story. It's always to be being an athlete, and then ESPN does a story about you. When you see a story about yourself on something like Nerdist. So we had a lot of help getting our goal so quickly.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome the first time I got like a Google notification for like my name showing up in an article.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a surprising thing. It's like, oh, they people know about me. My name's on the internet now.
Yeah, I think standard is when you have your own Wikipedia page, then you actually made it.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, that's next on the list of goals. I guess maybe first we finish the first volume and then we aim for the Wikipedia page, but next on the list of goals.
Yeah, because so you've been putting the comic out already for like 6 months, right?
So was the midpoint of last year. We had this idea. So we actually started off, I should mention.
Cool.
So what we were doing was we were interviewing African comic book artists and writers, and literature festival in the UK, which is called Africa Writes, and they were like, you guys could have one convention, but we didn't have anything to show. So my co-founder totally had the bright idea of, well, like some of the artists that we've had on the podcast to submit something, we could put together a little anthology. And that was sort of that sowed the seed. So we done this, but this was a master plan. But we did this, and we realized really quickly that this was the right direction for us to take.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely similar to the situation I think we found ourselves in as we set out and said, okay, if we're self-publishing this, we want to make it a big volume. We want to have it, not, hey, order this single issue online from us and pay more in shipping than for the issue. And then we realized, as much as we want to be going out to cons and tabling there and driving up enthusiasm that way, turns out you need a book for that. It works a lot better if you have an object in hand to offer them.
Where are you going to put your signature otherwise?
Yeah, I think naturally when you enter the people often get that a lot of these projects and ideas are things that are some sort of like grand master plan. Really, most of us are just like stumbling our way through this comic space and getting lucky. Oftentimes.
Lucky, yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not always.
Yeah, certainly not.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually we do have a question that's directed to both of us, actually. If you're interested in hearing it, might get things going for sort of like talking about the creative space. It says, so this is for both of us. How has working from non-Western source material impacted the writing process? Both African and Japanese cultures have immense differences with Western society and what constitutes a good story and aesthetic. As Western writers, do you find yourself going to certain lengths to reconcile these differences in style with your own? What are some of the challenges in transferring these different mediums, in our case, the Japanese war epic, and in your case, the African oral traditions, to that of a graphic novel?
Oh, that's a pretty substantial question. Who wants
We
to
can
go
start off
first?
if you wanna collect yourself.
Okay, yeah, please do.
So I know for me, and Dan, I'm sure you're gonna have a different perspective on this, but it didn't impact my writing process terribly because the differences between the Japanese story and like the Western story structure and aesthetic didn't really enter into the way I was analyzing the story when I read it. So like all of the analysis I did, I really just I tried to like draw all of my conclusions about the story from the story itself instead of like anything based on my own experiences or like my own culture. So in that regard, I don't think it really affected the way I wrote the story, but being mindful of like a Western audience and like what we need to communicate to an audience in order to get like the themes across, we have kept in mind in our like retelling.
Yeah, I think we've had that fairly constantly in mind.
Yeah.
And that our goal is not to warp these stories to fit more Western conceptions of story structure, but to try to make it clear to readers who are used to those conventions that no, this is also a complete story and you should interpret it as such. So we've like a handful of times as we've sort of gone into rambling discussions during late night writing sessions, Ben has brought up Dan Harmon's idea of the story circle and how basically none of these stories fit that, with the idea being, okay, your character starts out at a place and then something is challenged. I don't remember all of the layers, but they end up back at the same place but changed from the previous events. And frequently, and we're pulling stories from Tale of the Heike, it's the character ends up at a new place, and that place is like 50% of the time death, which makes it hard for them to be showing that they have learned from the... So saying like, okay, some of these like very standard episodic conventions, we can't fit that, but we need to keep in mind, is this ending going to feel too abrupt when we say, no, this is where the story ends, this is the climax, and figuring out what does it mean to translate that and have that come across, so you get that feeling of, this is a different convention than I'm used to, this is a different structure, but it still feels complete.
Yeah, and Bill mentioned in chat, it's the hero's journey. So like Dan Harmon describes the traditional hero's journey as like a story circle. Thanks, Bill.
So yeah, I've had to collect my thoughts, and it's I think I should point out is the 6 comics featured in the Kugali Anthology. So each creative team have taken a slightly different approach to emulate or recreating some of the African and modern tales as well. So I'll speak from my perspective, other people do. There are a lot of challenges in terms of, just in terms of the story. For me, it's fairly straightforward. I look at historical events that have taken place in my story. Sorry, fantasy, 13 West Africa. So I've just brushed up on my zeitgeist to be like, and then I try and then build a world that these characters are going to inhabit based off of that. And then what I just try and do is I true to my research. So like I want the weapons to mirror what the soldiers would have been using back then, because it's we like say medieval fantasy that everyone speaks with it. And obviously I can't resort to that, but speak like modern day West Africans either. So it was a bit of a challenge trying to sort of figure out like sweet spot. So in the end, you can only really use your information to try and fill the gaps that the research can't bring. And yeah, that's more. So what I've observed in the one of the most striking ones is like Kai and Abeni, where the characters have like really, really dark skin, and being designs on the, which is very akin to various but other brought a lot of really cool problem I like is to see me, or you have seen me, and then there's this idea that we all going to be witnessed, and so I try and weave in various things.
Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. I thought maybe you cut out for a moment. Yeah, what was it? Oh, you mentioned that you are trying to get you use dialect, and it's funny when you mentioned it, because like as soon as you said it, like it makes sense as like a thing to like transport the audience to a different place, but we actually have totally avoided using like any difference in speech patterns or anything. Like we've done it pretty much all through like aesthetic and art.
I think you can kind of go both, because on the one hand, these comics are in English, right? Books are in English. And so in a way, you're showcasing translation. You can either translate and have the flavor of modern writing. Certain like religious text, and you could pick like a copy of the Bible, for example, that has been written in a way that is more that's easier to read for modern people. Or you can try and translate it sort of word for word, and you have this really, really old style of. And I see different writers approach it. Some of them just the characters sound like modern day people in terms of how they're and that 100%.
Yeah, that's especially with the translation angle of it. I think we've had a number of debates about when do we want to use Japanese words that are common in English, like samurai or sake, and when do we want to like actually translate those? Because we're doing a translated version, and at some point it seems a little weird to have, well, we're using these original words, but we're changing others.
Yeah, and also, you know, now that I actually reflect on it, because this isn't something I actually had like thought about, but it makes sense that we're doing it the way we are, because we're trying to like lower the bar of entry to the story instead of yeah. So
yeah, that makes sense, and that's also another challenge that we sort of face ourselves in this. Even things like there's a slight sort of cultural difference in we all perceive. But what I find interesting, your story is set in Japan, and I'm a big fan of manga and anime, and you know, the Japanese writers, and I mean, just I guess Japanese culture has certain sensibilities that are very different. I mean, if you're a newbie to manga and anime, and going to be you're not going to be like, oh, like DC Comics, right? Very, very different. But somehow we've adapted ability to allow for Japanese sensibilities. I feel that we can achieve a similar effect with what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I definitely remember my. Okay, I definitely remember my first introduction to anime. I was in like maybe middle school at the time, but someone had been talking up Princess Mononoke, and we watched that. And I remember sitting there and thinking, like, this is clearly well done, and I am clearly missing a lot of the cultural context I need to actually appreciate all of the levels that are going on here. And so, like, gradually getting into that idea of understanding how the sense of humor works, how the sense of storytelling works, has been an interesting journey to go through on that.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. You often see in anime when it's dubbed, or even they use they will use some of the Japanese. I think in Naruto, for example, they use the word ninja instead of shinobi when they're putting in the translations when his moves. So he'll be like he might not say at least in subtitles he'll say kage bushin, the Sadako technique. It's like once you understand what kage bushin means, then that is what they say. And I see that a lot, where they keep certain Japanese words, and sometimes they even use certain words as well. They kind of have an interesting way of approaching thing, which is so there's no one size fits all approach. At least if you go by the example of manga and anime.
If you wouldn't mind it, I actually was really interested by what you said about how like you sort of touched on how you're putting the anthology together, because your role in this has actually been sort of, as I understand it at least, it's been like a dual role. You've been a creator, but you've also been like a curator and a publisher, ultimately. So I was wondering if you could talk some about the other, like the two sides of the business and how you've come to the position you're in it.
Okay, in many ways, two hats is like oil and water. They don't go together as nicely as you would hope they would. Because
can you say that again? Sorry, I missed it.
In many ways, the two hats, the publisher hat and the writer hat, it's almost like oil and water. They as well as you would hope, and you really have to create a system that allows these two very different roles to flourish. And how I try and navigate that is with writing. I always try and write first thing in the day, because that's when the creative energies are as the goes by, my energy is more emboldened. Where in the morning, then he doesn't really have that to say. So I suppose one of the consequences of that is just. But if you want to do these kind of things, that you have to make sacrifices. Not that it's not that big of a deal when there's a comic. In terms of how I've attempted to approach publishing, it's really it's a bit of a cliche now, but like the internet is just a wonderful thing. It's what's making this sort of international live stream happen. And so the do this maybe 10, 15 years ago, literally impossible. But because there's just so much information, there's so many opportunities to put your work out there. This possible to figure out a way to kind of like understand the systems and the internet kind of sort of to entry. I mean, this is a perfect example. Before we actually started off as a podcast, based in the foundation through which we've then been able to and sort of distributing to a lesser extent. I hope that covered a few of the bases.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been like a bit. It's been surprisingly, I mean, I guess not actually that surprising. It's been difficult to like make ourselves into a company. Like when you start with a creative endeavor, like you're all driven by the image of what you're trying to create, but the infrastructure of what you're doing and like the way you do it is just as important, for sure. Like you can't get by with a good vision at all. So particularly like when we were approaching publishers, it was just like we thought we knew what they wanted, but it's really difficult to approach the business from another perspective.
Yeah. The challenge is business doesn't it to a massive degree. Essentially, what we're talking about are gatekeepers, right? The gatekeepers between creators. In a pre-digital age, you had to go to the gatekeepers to get to the other side. And even today, if you switch the gatekeepers, then there's the double of to do something the gatekeepers like and something that the fans like. And sometimes, because the problem is the gatekeepers aren't all seeing. So, like a very good example is something like One Punch Man, which was independent initially, and then built such a strong fan base that it got picked up, and then got the anime adaptation. Now, the problem is that one success in probably dozens of failures. So it's still not that easy. Even though the people who have obviously managed to break in, there are many more people who try and go independent and unable to achieve the kind of success that.
Yeah, I definitely see the role for like a tastemaker, sort of like curator type position. But I suspect it's gonna, like, the face of it is gonna change a lot from like Marvel and DC, you know, in 15 years. I mean, like, I mean, I think they position themselves already, you know, like with alternate media and whatnot,
yeah,
that they'll be fine. But I think it's gonna look totally different.
Yeah, my own prediction, and I say that I mean terrible.
Yeah.
My prediction. We will have the DCs and the Marvel, but we also have people we'll have like smaller tribes. In other words, I don't know if you've ever come across the concept of true fans, but the idea that there's a blog post I think it's by Kevin Kelly, who's a co-founder of Wired, but he's talking about the idea of how you all you need is he kind of did mathematical analysis of, okay, if you have like 1,000 fans, like die-hard fans, actually make it as a creator. I think we will emerge into the 1,000 true fans where you might get this really, really cool comic. There are a handful of people that know it, and just by buying the comics, the merchandise, a lot of artists that will be able to reach smaller groups of people, versus everyone sort of wanting to be the next Stan or Tight Kubo, creator of Naruto.
Well, I'm going to let Dan get a word in edgewise. Sorry, I'm going to get water off just a moment.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's, like, thinking about the role that gatekeepers and publishers are having to play. Like, it makes sense that there's that divide there, because they sort of need to rely on somebody becoming the next big something or other. They've got a lot of overhead to put into putting things out. And so for them to take that gamble on, like, me and Ben as a couple of unknowns who have a cool idea, that requires a lot of faith. Whereas I think self-publishing and crowdfunding like this are really big right now, because it's exciting because you can have more ideas, because there's no need for us to get that big. No one is having to invest that much. Someone puts down $25 for a graphic novel and they don't like it, they're out $25. They're not out the difficulty of publishing and distributing and advertising this huge thing.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense, and for me, that is actually a great way of illustrating why it's such a good idea to try and pursue. We're all storytellers. We're opting for comics, but because, like you said, the worst thing that can happen is someone will buy your comic. Like,
yeah,
you've lost time, they lost a bit of money, but the grand is nothing that no one can rise up.
Yeah.
Except the bad review.
Yeah.
That cuts pretty deep.
That is true. But are you satisfied if you get a bad review before you even have a name? That actually is a good if you're famous, and then you.
Yeah. Well, are there any of the stories that you're going to be showcasing in the anthology that are highlights to you?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I won't too much favoritism, because like a parent, and you know when your children.
You can say your own story. You can plug your own story then. How about that?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, I'm obviously I'm very excited for my story, because I studied screen writing at university. My final year, which I then adapted into a graphic novel. So it's been something I've been working on for a long time. Feel this as well when you're just seeing someone illustrate ideas and seeing the story. So it's one experiences I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about that. I've been doing a lot of work on the league as well, because I've learned so much working with this team in terms of like what embarked on this journey. My MMO might do was something akin to like African superhero. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, superhero.
Oh, okay.
Right. So in my mind, oh, what would happen if, say, like Superman landed in Lagos, Nigeria? But once I started to work with the artists on the group, I realized that rather than sort of derivative works, there was an opportunity to create something different. You know, the same way that American comics, that there was an opportunity for us to do something like this. So yeah, I mean, just in terms of my story specifically, like I said, it's a fantasy, it's a sort of gore, blood, and guts, but really it's a story about torment and facing kind of like the darkest aspects of reality, and how far one can go into sort of the abyss before they're sort of like stuck there. And I really hope that it poses some questions in the minds of readers. So I'm really excited to put it out there and see what people think. Obviously, I'm excited about like some of the action scenes, the way we've built the creatures, like, and just do modification. So those are a few of the things that I'm excited about for my comic Iku in particular. But I'll mention one other comic I'm really excited about, which is Kai and Abeni. I think it probably really objective. I would say it's probably the really striking the lot, because what the creator's done, Bar is from Senegalese, is he's because obviously he's been working in France for a long time, so he's come the influences that he's come across in France. Love with manga, the young age, he's taken from that, but he's also taken from his Senegalese heritage. Kind of like this delicious amalgamation of all three. Lovely. It's a futuristic space adventure story, but it doesn't have a feel to it. It's very drab and dreary. Dakar and Senegal, which also sort of to it, because a lot of the equipment there is sort of second and rugged.
Cool.
So,
yeah, the
monologue.
No.
That's good. That's the thing you mentioned about seeing the art come back and seeing these ideas and these scripts you've written coming to life definitely strikes a chord. I think it still has not gotten old. Every single time we get a new page back from Milan, we're just like thrilled and overjoyed and so excited to see like this thing we wrote is now visualized, now actually a page. And definitely, like, we keep thinking about scenes that are coming up, things we're even more excited to see translated onto the page.
Yeah, and this is, since this Seno that was our flagship issue, or sorry, not our flagship, our premiere issue. Like, we'd never written a comic before, and it was awesome not only to see like our ideas get transferred to the page, but to like realize the benefits of the team. Like, I can't sing Milan's praises enough, because a lot of the times, like, what we wrote, like, he took and just made better when he turned it into art. So like I think our issue, Dan, was that we sort of like, when we started, we thought of the comic as like a storyboard for a movie instead of like a comic. And Milan has been studying comics and is just like, a fantastic artist. So he better understands the difference. Like, a storyboard for a movie can like get you halfway there, but it's not going to get you like a really good comic.
Yeah, I think it wasn't so much we were thinking of it as one, as that it didn't occur to us that there were differences to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I do think we've been at this about 40 minutes. We should maybe pause a second to reintroduce ourselves for anyone who's joined in, and then let you get to your thought. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No worries, that's fine.
So I'm Dan Miles.
I'm Ben Fleeby.
We're co. Oh, yeah, go.
Oh no! Finish yours.
Okay, so the two of us are co-creators of Tale of the Taira. It's an adaptation of a medieval Japanese epic. Our first volume that we're funding through Kickstarter now, that you can see the information for, I think, along the side of this page. Our first volume is collecting a sort of handful of different stories that across this epic that can stand alone, and putting them together, juxtaposing against each other in a way that I think will be really cool and bring out a lot of the details. Highly encourage you to check it out and check out the main page. We'll be talking more about that. And we're joined by...
Hi, people. My name is Nelson. I'm co-founder of Kugali, of the graphic novel Equal. We're also having our own, bringing forth something known as the Kugali Anthology, which is a collection of African comics made by various people of Africa and continent and the diaspora, and basically bringing forth 6 comics that are going to be collected into 2 separate anthologies. And the genre, they range from just urban fantasy, sci-fi, epic fantasy, a whole host of stories, really.
And both campaigns are now funded, so you're no longer chasing a dream if you pledge.
Exactly, yeah.
No matter what, whether you back us or you back Kugali, you will end up with a thing in your hands at the end of it.
Or a PDF or whatever else you request.
Whatever you want. Whatever you want, you'll get.
So Bill dropped in a message that insight into what we were talking about earlier, which is the writers, and so we all work with artists who help us sort of our stories to a visual perspective. And I read his message verbatim. It's the visual language of a story speaks as much of the world that you're trying to build, they say and do. And so when you work with a really talented artist, there's so much of the story. It's its own kind of like dynamic of storytelling, and then certainly when trying to write, I've even went to film school, and then all I was thinking is words. I wasn't thinking visuals.
Yeah.
And because artists think language, even when you think in visuals, the artist will add even more to that and make it even better.
Yeah, tying back into one of the things you said earlier, talking about sort of that dual role as you publisher and curator and writer. I was not expecting the level of to which putting out a comic book was going to mean. Our job was get on social media and plug it everywhere and be ready for that constantly. But conveniently, having to keep ourselves brief and, Twitter character limits and people not wanting to read, mountains of Facebook posts has gone nicely hand in hand with, okay, we need to think about the visualness of the medium and cut down on how much we're just throwing words into it. There's at least some convenient synergy there.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because Bill, who's couldn't make it, him and I are huge otakus, and a lot of my storytelling technique I've kind of internalized from reading so much manga and watching a lot of anime, which very expository. I didn't really realize how expository it was until like I look back on some of like my old scripts, which are essentially because of my favorite mangas, and then it's interesting. style of storytelling works to an extent, but deviating inherited from the more kind of cleaner people. That
You cut out a little bit, but what I got is that like being concise enriches your work.
Curious how you guys have navigated that, because I mean,
Sorry, I'm not hearing you, man. Can you say that again? You're cutting out a bit much. Yeah.
Yep.
You hear me?
Yeah, I think so.
My writing needs to be highly expository, but by being more improved as a storyteller, but kind of expository works for some stories. It doesn't seem to work for mine. You guys navigated that space.
I think we've very much sort of vacillated back and forth in trying to find the sweet spot there. We've put a lot of effort into like, okay, we know we're both very wordy as writers, and so paring things down and avoiding too much exposition, even figuring out like how to structure the volume so that we don't need to give lots and lots of backstory immediately, so that we can make these sort of standalone stories, and like giving ourselves a strict word limit per panel. And that's been hard, but we've made good progress on that, to the extent where once we got that first issue, The Death of Senno, done to the point where we could start showing it to people, we discovered maybe we had cut out a little too much of the exposition, and there were some plot points or concepts that people are missing. So between like the version we have as a sample up on the Kickstarter page right now of the first 8 pages, and the actual thing you will see once we get it printed and send it out as the final version, we're adding back in a couple of like narration boxes or lines here or there to add some extra clarity. To like, started with too much exposition, got to too little, hopefully tweaking it up just a tad to hit the right amount to make it clear without bogging down the story. But it's a balancing act.
Yeah, and I think our intuition towards wordiness is a bit different between Dan and myself. Like, for me, I think it's more about like the structure of the story being one that lends itself more to like being written than being shown. And Dan's tends to be more on the like actual like script itself, like the words people use. So in that regard, I think we like complement each other well in terms of like knowing what we need to cut. But fortunately, the source material we're using is a bit of like a driving force in that it, you know, like has a lot of action, and we know where we're starting in a story and we know where we want to go. So it gives us convenient rails to stay on.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have to nip off in just over 5 minutes. But one thing I really wanted to talk about before I left was fight. Because I think both of our comics are going to be full of those, and I've been thinking a lot about how to create really cool fight scenes that are going to be taking. As much as our story have themes that have philosophy, people just want to see the characters beat each other up. And what I've observed is that there's so styles of doing fight scenes that are all equally riveting. So some comics and some mangas have a more realistic fight scene, and so to make up for the lack of flashy set piece, they just like ramp up the they ramp up the tension. So one thing I noticed is like in a lot of real life martial arts battles, in anime, for example, a lot of the time the fighters are just looking at each other and they're trying to just read each other's minds, and that sort of inner dialogue, and it's almost like a chess match, is very engaging. But then on the other hand, you have more sort of overzealous fight scenes where it's just like non-stop acrobatics, kicks and punches, and so on and so forth. So for me, like navigating the two ends of the extremes.
A lot of our fight scenes were like constantly driven to sort of like do a zoomed out like strategic view of fights, because like a lot of the fights are battles, like big battles, but our artist Milan sort of like the way he like sees perspective and stuff, like constantly tries to like constrict it and make it more personal from its view. But I don't know, what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think we've got a few different things that we do, I think. One is, I think we're always trying to make sure the battle and however much time is spent on the fight serves the story in some functional way. Because I know, especially lately, as I watch movies and TV and there are fight scenes, I just sort of wait for the fight scene to end unless it's really visually engaging, because I can see what it's trying to do, and I get the plot point, and 2 minutes later they finish wrapping up that fight, and now we get on to the next plot point. So actually, in this first issue, Senno, we have a couple of different fights where we basically skip most of the fight. You get a bit of your like taste of action as the stuff ramps up and you see the beginning of it, and then we cut right to the aftermath. And I think there are like 3 or 4 fight scenes over the course of the issue where like, and I think only one of those do we watch the whole dragged out fight happen, because that's one of the more emotional climaxes of the story. So we've played a bit with that, and I think going forward we're going to have more stories where you like see that whole fight, but trying to keep that personal perspective and make sure the stake and the like philosophical point or the plot point or the theme really comes out there. Like with Senno, for example, we have a fight scene that shows her strategic brilliance and why she's such a valued lieutenant, and we have a fight scene that sort of shows her mercilessness and how she interprets her loyalty to be at all costs, no matter what has to happen in that fight. And we have others that go on that show different sides to the character, and I think trying to make sure that always comes across in the fight scene, as well as the excitement of action, is one of our driving goals.
Yeah, and making action compelling through making the conflict a physical manifestation of like a greater like sort of like underlying issue that is at odds.
Yeah. If we can throw one question in before you have to go, we got a comment somewhere on the campaign page. I don't know, but I got an email notification for it.
Oh, great.
A question from Diane Fleeby asking, now that we met the main goal, what can we look forward to with possible stretch goals? So do you want to at least real quick give us the upcoming stretch goals we should be excited about for Kugali?
Oh, yeah, sure, 100%. So the first one, which we hit, is,
congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Is essentially there's a lot of concept. There's been a lot of concept art and sketch gone into creating these comics, and we figured it'd be interesting to share the sort of like a behind the scenes with the back. So we put together a book that we're going to make available to the back after having hit. And the next stretch, I think we're fairly close to, is actually including some pages from that digital art book into the anthology. Each of the stories that you read, you'll be able to read some of see some of the concept art and then the sketches that led up to the creation of stories, development, etc., etc. And the biggest one that we've announced is a motion comic. And I'm not sure how familiar with motion comics because it's still like halfway between comic animation. It's like using the still images of comics to create of movement. So
like parallax, right?
Yeah, I mean, 100% like that. Yeah, exactly. So those are the 3 stretch goals that we've announced.
Cool.
And our first stretch goal for those interested is a PDF of like a behind the scenes of our creative process.
So that's I think sounds similar to the artbook writing. Yeah. We're throwing in a combination of like we got sample art from a variety of artists as we were finding Milan and Milos, and so some of those different tastes of visual directions the comic could have gone in, which are very different in some cases. We weren't sure exactly where we wanted to go with art. We were trying to be open-minded about possibilities. There's some neat things in there, and also some of these like historical details and like history of the text, talking about how we chose to adapt it in the way that we did, which we're excited about sharing because there's some cool historical detail in there that it's really hard to fit into the comic itself.
And how far away are you from this particular show?
Well, when we started, I think we were 600 away.
Okay.
Yeah.
But hopefully a bunch of people have pledged since then.
Yeah, exactly. About Kickstarter is like you log on, and then even if it's just like one pledge, you're like, yes, like another dollar closer to the goal. But yeah, that sounds like a really, really cool, because I'm really interested in, yours is more of a direct adaptation versus, what I'm working on, which is, mostly my imagination.
Yeah.
I'm always curious about like, and then adaptations for the comic. Like, I think there's a lot of interesting thoughts that go behind approaching this. So I'm just want to say I'm personally looking forward to hopefully smashing that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
So we can let you go at this point if you need to head out. Thank you for joining us and being accommodating about timing. For those of you watching, we had an interesting thing where we very carefully checked the time difference between the US and the UK and communicated that very clearly. And then daylight savings time happened last night.
Very
and it
convenient.
turns out that changes things because those don't happen at the same time in different countries. So thank you for accommodating the timing change. And thank you for joining us. It's been exciting talking.
Yeah, it's been such a thanks. And we definitely have a schedule to talk about the creative process because I feel like we've only just cracked the tip of the iceberg thus far.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, guys, take care.
All right.
You too. I think Ben and I may keep going for a little bit. Another thank you to Ziki for joining us and talking about Kugali. It's been exciting. If you have any questions, you should feel free to ask them. There is the chat tab. There is the question tab or button or however it shows up for you. We have a tab for it. We really want to get to know our backers and what you're excited in, or our potential backers, and especially what you're excited about. And being able to tell you whether or not we're offering that. So in the meantime, to talk a little bit more about our stretch goals. So the one upcoming is, as we mentioned, the PDF of some behind the scenes concept art, sample pages, details of how we went into the adaptation process, how our project evolved over time as we did things. The next goal, which is another 2K behind that, which is an ambitious goal, but certainly possible. We've got just over 2 days left in the campaign. So if you help us spread the word, we can definitely get there. And that's a collaboration with Conceptopolis, who we're really excited about working with. They have done a lot of great artwork for some of the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition rule books. They have done it for a couple of different video games, and they have done it for, and here's the key tie-in, Legend of Five Rings. I think the card game primarily. And so that's some really beautiful art that they've done, and we're really excited about getting them to do a variant cover, which will be, right now, the different tiers there's the default cover by Milan, and then Milan will also be doing a variant cover for, I think it's the $50 tiers and above. But
so.
if we reach that stretch goal, that cover will be done by the Conceptopolis art team, which we think is going to be really cool if we can get there.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. We actually already have some of the ideas for both the standard cover art and the variant cover, and we're pretty sure Conceptopolis could really make it come to life. So yeah, so thank you for the questions we've gotten so far. But pending any future ones, we mentioned last time some of our favorite weird side stories that sort of litter the tale of the Heike. And one of the ones we actually found recently as we were digging into it, because we've read it enough times, but these things continue to pop up, was a story of a conspirator at a I don't know, a summit, I guess you might call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a summit. Who betrays his fellow cloak and dagger people as they conspire, and he betrays, in fact, the retired emperor Go Shirakawa, a very important person. And way down the story, 8 chapters later, hundreds of pages later, just randomly slipped in, he is one of the guys that Go Shirakawa, as he flees from a bit of a barbarian invasion, enlists to help carry his palanquin.
So there are a lot of neat cases where you see a more complete character arc when you piece together the different stories a character appears in. So we were really excited when we realized, oh, this person who betrayed the conspiracy shows up later. Wait, what does he do? Huh.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get interesting surprises. Another fun story, I think if we don't get more questions, we'll wrap it up shortly, but you should get some storytelling out of this. We've been looking a lot at the suggestions from some people who are more familiar than we are with Japanese history about other sources to draw on. One of my favorites in particular, so Celia Moradian, who is a friend of mine who has done a lot of academic work on literature, especially by women in the Heian period, pointed out that we have a lot of primary sources of people who interacted with these characters who are so pivotal to the tale of the Heike. One of them, I think I mentioned it on the last stream, is the Poetic Memoirs of Lady Daibu, who is a historical figure who does not appear explicitly in the tale of the Heike, but is present during all of that time period and interacting with many of the key figures, as she details in her own memoirs. And one of my favorite stories, and the reason I really want us to include not just insights from her interactions, but actually stick her in there as a character in the story. There's this great story that's not even from the memoirs, but in the introduction to the translated version I've got, mentions one of the ways we know historically where she was when was an account that somebody else wrote where one of the key political figures who is incredibly powerful throughout the tale of the Heike and like goes to great length to take out his political opponents and keep himself in power, but by the end finds a lot of that scheming has backfired, and he still ostensibly has power, but is really just sort of a puppet figure and like greatly diminished by the course of events that he helped set in motion. By the end, there's this incident after the whole war, after the story, where he sends a letter to another of these co-conspirators that basically says, I'm sitting in the capital. I know it's been snowing out at the monastery where you are. Could you please send me, like, collect and send me a nice barrel full of snow so I could make a nice snow pile to play with? And the beauty of seeing that arc and that transition from power to sort of just being a figurehead with nothing to do is so beautifully solidified by that it's almost shocking to me it wasn't in the Tale of the Heike itself. But then Lady Daibu comes in because she hears this monk scraping snow off his roof to send to this person. And her response is to quickly write up a poem and throw it over the wall at him, which says so many beautiful things about like the history and the role of poetry and the roles of these characters. And I think I'm not going to read the poem to you yet because I don't want to spoil the whole thing, and I really want us to have this scene make it into the comic in a later volume. But the beauty of being able to bring in these other primary sources of the era that enrich the story in that way is one of the things I'm really excited about in an adaptation.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, we are going to highlight one of the stories in the next volume. Since we're funded on this one, we already have, we have this thing planned out for the next 5 years of our life. But the next volume, if this one goes well and we get funded for the next, would include one of these like oral tradition stories that isn't actually in the Heike itself. It's like a localized version of like one of the stories we're going to tell, a monster story where it's just like it's a layer on top of it where like a monster isn't what it seems to be. So we'll tell both versions. Like you'll get the version that is common in the Heike, and then afterwards we're going to introduce you to this like deeper version as well. So
yeah, and there are I think a few different stories where we have that in mind, because for a historical account, the Tale of the Heike sure does have a lot of monster stories in it.
Yeah.
Not like a lot, but they actually serve some interesting roles, and when you dig into the history, there are some very interesting layers to what's going on there that we're excited to be able to pick apart. I think let's wrap it up with that. Thank you all so much for joining us. We hope we've been entertaining. We hope if you haven't backed yet, we have been interesting enough to convince you that you want a copy of this, you want to see where it goes. If you have backed yet, or if you haven't, you can share this, you can share the campaign page, you can help us reach those next couple stretch goals. We've got 2 days left, and we are thrilled and overjoyed, and thank you so much for getting us to our funding goal. So we are going to have this funded, but we're excited to see how far we can take it before the campaign ends, and we hope you'll help us out in getting there.
Thanks, guys. Bye.